Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm Gary Polland, and Dallas Jones is off this week. This week we're going to talk about a very important topic, immigration and Homeland Security. And for such a big topic, we have three important guests. First, Representative Gina Calanni from District 132, the Katy area, yes. Texas House of Representatives. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Next, Jacob Monty, former University of Houston Regent, immigration expert in the law and a lead partner in Monty and Ramirez, a significant law firm in the Houston area. And finally, Manne Favor, Executive Director of Justice for Our Neighbors, but not for us, right, Manne? Or us too. We count, right?
For everyone.
All right, Manne, I'm going to give you the first question. What is Justice for Our Neighbors? Quickly, and then I'm going to get into the topic.
Thank you very much. Justice for Our Neighbors Houston is actually a non-profit legal immigration service provider. We are part of a national network with offices in different cities across the country.
Okay, so you help people legally immigrate to America.
Yeah, we help people who come to America who want to be part of our society and who want to comply with the law. So we provide legal representation for low-income individuals and families who otherwise would not be able to afford private representation.
All right, so let's talk about, do we have an immigration or illegal immigration problem in America today, do you believe?
Well, the truth is that our current immigration system needs reform. A system that separates children from their parents, a system that detains immigrants who haven't committed any crime and holds them for an undetermined amount of time, a system where immigrants have no representation. Such a system is not an equitable system for everyone. So yeah, there is need for reform.
So are you talking about the legal immigration system? You apply, you enter the country legally, or are you talking about people who enter the country illegally and now want to get to stay? Is there a distinction there?
You see, the clients that we represent are individuals who come to this country fleeing violence, fleeing life-threatening situations and conditions, and we have laws in our nation to offer these people asylum. So we think that everyone deserves due process, fair hearing, and legal representation.
So you would support increasing the number of immigration judges, for example?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Because of the wait being so long.
Correct.
That's a common sense reform.
That is a common sense reform, yes.
Are you aware that about 80% plus of the asylum seekers, when they go to court, lose? They're found that it's not a good basis to stay. Did you know that?
Actually, part of the problem for that is the fact that there is no representation. Everyone, like I said earlier, deserves due process, and part of that due process is the access to a lawyer to represent them. You know, research shows that 99% of, an immigrant, an asylum seeker, for instance, who is applying for status for relief, stands a chance of being approved if that application is.
So they have a lawyer, they have a better chance.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that people should be hiring Jacob Monty if they have a problem and they're illegally in the country.
If they can afford
he's a great
him.
lawyer.
Yes, if they can afford him.
Let's move to Jacob. Jacob, we got an illegal immigration problem in the country?
We do. We also have a legal immigration problem in that we don't admit enough workers. Our economy needs more workers. I just want to focus on the economic part of it.
Okay.
You know, leave the heart and the right thing to do for aside. Our economy needs more workers right now, and yet this administration is wanting to reduce the number of people we admit into the country. If we had 200,000 H-1B workers.
Explain what that is.
These are highly skilled workers that come in to work for a limited period of time, and the economy needs more workers. We only have 65,000 of them every year. If we had 200,000 of them, the stock market would be higher than it is now, certainly. Our economy is creating more jobs than we have available workers, so we need more immigrants, but we also need low-skilled immigrants also. We need more workers.
Well, we had a program in the 1950s called the Bracero program, where we allowed people to come in with work permits. So they weren't here illegally. They're legally here to work. That means they couldn't be exploited by people because they're in the country illegally, etc. Why don't we go to a program like that?
Well, there's been talk. Bush was trying to push for a guest worker program. 9/11 happened, and everything along the lines of immigration reform stopped. But this administration has made the situation worse. The rhetoric is terrible, and I'm talking as a Republican. The rhetoric is terrible. The policies are bad, and they're not even pro-business policies. Usually, you expect a Republican to have a pro-business platform. It's certainly not the case with this administration.
Okay. Last but not least, you deal obviously in the Texas legislature with different party. You're a Democrat. The Republicans are in control marginally, but you have to work with your colleagues to get anything done. I was going to ask you, why can't we get anything done in Washington on immigration? Nothing. No progress. I mean, allegedly, everyone agreed there should be a program, a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, as young people who were brought to the country originally illegally and have stayed, and this is really the only country they know. But they agreed, but then they don't agree on anything. So maybe we need to take the Texas legislature to Congress and move Congress to the Texas legislature. What do you think?
I'm going to pass on that one. But I'm going to go back to the legal argument part and say I visited Carrizo Springs, which is one of the detention centers for the children, and they had facilities set up there for legal services, and there were no legal services being offered. They would not allow them onto the detention center, and those children are supposed to have representation.
Right.
So that's a big issue. And so they go for their day in court, they're children, and no one's there.
No one's represented.
Right.
And these are, I take it, these are services like Manny's group that will offer free legal services to folks.
Right.
And they don't get it.
And they were not allowed on the detention center.
So part of the problem we have is that people are not getting their day in court with a competent representation, which is a problem. Besides the fact they have to wait forever to get to court, which is also a problem, which causes the crowdedness at the centers and the like that you went down and saw.
Yeah, and the children, I talked to the head of Department of Human and Health Services, and he said that they try and get everyone out within 30 days or so, but I spoke to several of the children, and that was not the case. And they are moved from one facility to another, which I don't know if that is to make it to look like they're not longer than what they're actually there. And then to me, it would seem that if your goal is to get these children reunited with their family members, then you should be using every opportunity that you can to get them to a family member, but they're only being offered a phone call twice a week.
So what you're telling me is the system is broken.
Yeah.
Basically destroyed. It's not functional. In fact, one of the statistics I read, we're on track to have 1 million people captured illegally entering the country this year, which is more than we've had in the last 7 or 8 years. Not the record, which is back in about 10 years ago when we had well north of 1 million, but still a whole lot of folks. The border is basically a sieve. It's a joke. I mean, it is. And our system just isn't functioning. So I want to go back to you on, so why can't Congress get its act together and do something? I mean, the way it is in Austin, when you have a bill that you want to get passed, you have to build a coalition to support it, correct? And so you build that coalition, and it may be Republicans and Democrats, there may be things that you can get a group of supporters. If you do X, Gina will be with you. If you can live with that compromise, you do it, and you make progress, because progress is normally made incrementally in politics. So in Washington, it seems like both sides are all or nothing. You give me everything I want, or I'm not playing. Am I missing something?
I can't speak for Washington because I'm not part of Washington. I can say that I think something that we do differently in Texas than what the U.S. does is we sit together in the House, and so in U.S. Congress they sit separately based upon partisan, and we don't. We're all mixed together, and maybe that provides us a better opportunity to work together.
And you don't get vilified, do you, in your district by fellow Democrats if you actually talk to a Republican representative? Nobody bothers you about that?
I'm not advised on that, no. I think, they're on both sides of the aisle. There's people that are very extreme, and so some people might get upset, and some people realize that, if you want to get something done, then you need to work with everyone. Right,
but there's I would assume there's a large group that's like in the center that's happy to work with whoever wants to work with them and doesn't care about your party label.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we could deal with the problem in Austin. Right, Jacob? Okay, let's talk about Homeland Security. There's talk that the illegal immigration is, as you talked about under Bush, Jacob, that after 9/11, the immigration reform went out the window because they were concerned about Homeland Security. So how does Homeland Security and immigration laws interact together?
Well, I think everyone, I would think everyone wants security. I think everyone here at the table wants security. Sometimes the people that are against immigration say, no, what they want are open borders. I have yet to meet someone who's advocating for open borders. I'm looking, but I haven't found anyone yet. So, the language has been weaponized, and if you're not in favor of draconian, zero immigration policy, then they call you an open borders advocate, but I think that's not the case. So I think the reason we don't get anything done is the language gets weaponized, and you just start repeating things that aren't even true.
But if we have 1 million entries illegally on the southern border, doesn't that create a national security issue in terms of who else is coming in? It's not just children with their parents or significant friends or
you got to vet them. You have to vet everyone, and you have to make sure that they're not a danger to the country. The asylum laws on the books right now do a good job of vetting out the claims. As you said, most of the people don't qualify for the under the current system. Most of the people from Central America, but there is a system. I also think that we have not even addressed the 8 to 10 million people that are here right now. No one has background checked them.
No.
Well, what about them? They've been here longer than the new arrivals. Why don't we start with them? But yet Congress won't deal with that. And then, again, back to words. If you advocate for that, they say you want amnesty. Well, what we have right now is amnesty.
It's de facto amnesty, not legal amnesty. Well, that's a big problem. But one of the concerns you read across the border, they find the border security people find Korans, other examples.
Oh, Gary, I've been waiting. They
says
just keep repeating that. I want to see a Koran. I want to see a prayer rug.
Okay,
in El Paso. I'm from El Paso. But yeah, I mean,
I'm sure they have a display where you can go see it, Jacob. But you don't know who's coming to the country is the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fact. I mean, you and I don't know. We have 1 million that were actually apprehended. How many weren't apprehended? So that creates a national security issue.
7,000 cameras along the border.
It's more secure now than you did.
Oh, so Trump has done some good, you said? There might be something he did?
That's our, that's
Texas
Texas
did.
has done.
I think it
Oh,
was
y'all
more
did it.
secure even
Yes.
under Obama. I mean, this isn't. What we got now is a lot more fanfare and press conferences.
Yeah, Obama actually did do a lot of work on the border. Didn't talk about it a lot because it wasn't politically correct, but he did do a lot.
But the amount of high-tech technology that we have along the border is impressive. I've gone to the headquarters of DPS and looked at it, and they're monitoring everything. And it's a huge team, and it's the 7,000 cameras. They take, if there's even just a motion, then they take a picture, a snapshot, sends the GPS location, and someone can be there immediately.
If we had enough border agents, I guess.
I think we have quite a few.
Okay, but you go back to, Manny, what Jacob talked about, which is, Congress can't get anything done. And so we're stuck with laws that don't work. We have people that are in the country working that are illegal, and thus being able to be exploited by employers and the like. And so your job and what you're trying to do is bring people out of the shadows. Is that right?
That's correct. We're trying to bring people out of the shadows and get them properly integrated into the system. Most of the clients that we represent don't want to be undocumented. To be honest with you, I have personally never met anybody who wants to remain undocumented.
That makes sense.
Most people want to be documented. They want to come out of the shelters. They want to participate in the American lifestyle, if you will, and have a piece of the American dream. And the challenges they face, though, in that endeavor is the fact that, number one, the immigration system is so complicated and convoluted that there is no way that they can navigate through those systems, that system by themselves. On the other hand, without legal representation, they don't stand a chance. And the cost of having private representation is unaffordable for most immigrants. So that's where we come in, and we offer these services to people who want to comply with the laws. There are laws in the books.
You teach English as a second language?
We actually partner with other organizations that do that. So we just focus on legal immigration.
You would agree
services.
that it's important to enter the country, when you get into the country, you want to stay to learn English and learn American culture and customs, as well as add your culture and customs to the melting pot.
Most of our clients want to be part of the American society, and they want to become citizens. And as you know, in order to become citizen, you have to be able to speak the language. So yeah, they want to be part of the American.
All right, so
lifestyle.
You're a legislator. What can we do with our laws to get them straight? What's it going to take?
I mean, as far as immigration, that's federal issue. That's not something that we
I understand,
can
but you're a
do.
citizen. You get to vote for a congressman and a senator and a president.
I think, number one, we should be sending more legal teams down to the border to address that, especially judges and people that can advocate for the people that are coming across. When you've got someone seeking asylum, that's not illegal, and they're coming from a really bad situation, then we should do what we can to help them.
What about the talk that the concept is we need to get control of the border, and then when we get control of the border, we need to address the 8 to 10 million people who are already in the country, and what we're going to do about them. I'm sure that your idea would be, and if I'm wrong, you tell me, that if they've been law-abiding, right, and they want to pay whatever fees the Congress decides they need to pay, and do the things they need to do to become a citizen, they should be able to do that. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, where else are they going? I mean, what are they going to do?
Right.
Now, the problem with the concept of letting anyone who wants to come, Jacob, is that if you open the doors, we'd have, 100 million people wanting to come in to America, which would change the country irretrievably, and we don't need 100 million new people in the country. So how do we get to the point where you talked about, which is creating the opportunity for people to come to America if they just want to work, expanding the visas for really engineers, I guess, and scientists? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, anyone with a bachelor's degree would be eligible
to apply.
Yeah.
Now, the critics of that say that means that Americans are not going to get those jobs. But your position on that would be what?
Well, we have more than enough jobs right now. If you're an employer in Houston, you can't find enough workers to hire right now. And it's been like this for a long time.
So you have a lot of, your firm does that. You represent a lot of employers, do you?
Yes, but Manny was right. The system is so hard, it's complex, and if you've ever fallen out of status, there's no way for you to get back in line. People talk about a line. There is no line.
There is no line.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the language. Why don't they get in line? There is no line.
What line?
Yeah,
that's
there
the
is
question
no
I
line.
asked. What line?
So that's a big problem.
Huge problem. And then groups like Manny's are great, but there's a lot of scoundrels out there, notarios.
Correct.
A notary in Mexico or in El Salvador is like a judge. But here in the U.S. Or in Texas, a notary is just someone who is not a felon and who registers with the state, and they prey on people. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of.
Oh yeah,
scams.
we see a lot of scams like
So
that.
maybe we need to simplify our laws so they're easy to understand,
Absolutely.
as opposed to being complicated.
Right.
And we also need to make our laws not be so overly punitive against and be tilted against immigrants who are trying to comply, who are trying to do the right thing.
And we also have limited numbers of legal immigrants that are getting in the country. I have a story to tell. I was involved in, there's filings you can now make where you end up having the children who are here become part of a family law case, and then in the family law case, the state gets involved, and then they basically that's a pathway to citizenship that actually works. So I got involved. I got appointed as an amicus attorney in one of those cases for a young man, and he was great. I mean, he'd been here for 15 years. He was going to finish the top 10% of his class. He was going to go to, I think he had a scholarship to Rice, and so he wanted to take care of this. And one of the things you have to prove is in his home country, which was El Salvador, there was nobody you could live with and be safe, right? And so he had been living with his grandmother. So the judge asked, well, I see here that your grandmother, you were living with your grandmother in El Salvador. He says, right. And I said, well, Judge, let me ask a few questions. I said, where's your grandmother? He said, she's in America. Judge said, oh, did she come here illegally? He said, no. She had signed up 10 years ago and finally got called.
Wow.
Pretty funny story. So he got to stay, needless to say.
Yeah.
And the grandmother came here legally. But isn't that interesting? And that's part of the problem that we have, I think it pointed out. And what I said to the judge was, see, this points out the problem. You have the grandmother who wanted to immigrate who's been in line for 10 years and finally gets called because of the limited number that we allow in each year.
But depending on the country of origin, it can take even longer than that. It can take up to 18 years.
Yeah.
Gary is one of the Republicans like me who is kind to immigrants. You and I worked on a tragic case
Yes.
where a kid was deported from this country. He was a great student.
He was a
What
great
was his
kid.
crime? He met a girl in grade school. He was 3 years older than her.
Romeo
They,
and Juliet.
they charged him with statutory rape, and he was deported. And now he's living in El Salvador. And the penalties are too harsh, definitely.
Yeah, we tried to undo that case. And the judges didn't want, we filed a writ of habeas corpus, tried to undo the conviction because he should have never pled because it was consensual and it was Romeo and Juliet. Now we have a law now that the legislature passed for that, but this was like 10 years ago. We didn't have that law, so you're kind of stuck with the laws you have. That was a tragedy. Sad. It was a great kid. He was bright.
Worked at Enron.
Yeah. Enron. But it wasn't his fault that Enron fell apart.
It is obvious that immigration laws are biased against immigrants, and you know, I think it's time for reform.
Well, we have a history in America of going through these periods where we're anti-immigration. I mean, I can tell you that for my ancestors, my grandfather came to America in the early 20th century from Poland. But when he came, the rules were very strict. So you had to go through, he went through Ellis Island. You had to have a sponsor. I mean, the kind of thing that Trump is now talking about. You had to have a sponsor. They had to sign an affidavit agreeing with the government there would be no welfare, no public benefits, no public charge. You're responsible. And then you got to Ellis Island, you had to go through inspection, which is medical check. And if you have any kind of disease they didn't like, you go back on the boat and go back to the old country. But he got in, fortunately. But it was strict.
It's strict now. I mean, and immigrants don't qualify for welfare, but you know, Trump's trying to make that into a new idea. It's already on the books. If you're an immigrant, you don't get welfare.
Yeah, well, he wants to make it new. Okay, I want to hear a little bit about your committee, because you are very familiar with, obviously, with the border. And in fact, did you support having the DPS at the border? Do you think that was helpful?
Having them there? I mean, I think DPS is helpful in a lot of ways. I think that in the previous session, we sent $800 million, I guess it was in 2015.
Yes.
And then did it again in 2017. And there was a legislation filed this time to try and see if could be a study done to see how effective that money has been, but we were not able to get that passed.
Oh, you couldn't seem to make a lot of sense. I'd have voted for it.
Yeah.
I think Jacob would have voted for it too.
I mean, I think it'd be good to know where the money's going, and anytime there's questions regarding that, it's like, well, can't let you know exactly what it is because that would give away the secrets, kind of thing. So. Well,
but you're one of their bosses.
Yeah.
Okay, so other topics you've dealt with in this area?
Homeland Security, or
yes.
no, in
Homeland
immigration.
Security Committee. Homeland Security Committee.
Homeland Security, we actually went and visited the RGB and checked it out. We went and saw there is a wall right there. You know, it's a fence. And
could you get over it?
We could walk around it. It's open.
Oh, okay.
But no one was there. And I actually spoke with a lot of residents that are in the RGB and asked them, you know, are you supportive of creating a bigger wall or anything like that? And none of them were. And it's not something that they find that they want on Texas property. So, and I also asked about human trafficking because that's an issue that's really close to my heart. And they said they were not seeing any major human trafficking within that area.
Zone?
Right.
Wow.
So I think that there's a lot of talk about things like that, and I don't think that there's actual facts to back them up.
That's interesting. Has DPS asked for anything else from your committee they didn't get in terms of the border?
No, I don't think that they asked for anything they didn't get. So.
Very good. Okay, Jacob. So, what's your solution to the problem? What in a perfect world? We have 2 minutes left, so each of you get to tell me, in a perfect world, what should our immigration law be?
First, we got to solve the problem of the dreamers. They were brought to this country without any fault of their own. We need to give them legal status and a path to citizenship.
As long as they're not criminals, is that it?
Of course. I mean,
yes, it goes without saying.
It goes without saying.
Okay.
Then we need to start dealing with the 8 to 10 million people that have been here. Some of them have been here for 20 years. Because of the bars, the 3 and 10 year bars, they're stuck in and they can't. So we need to deal with the people that are here, that have been here for a
So
long
those are your
time.
top 2 priorities. Okay, how about you, Manny?
I think that right along with that would be to stop the action of separating children from their families immediately. That action needs to be discontinued, and then we need to figure out a way to not keep people in detention for indefinitely.
So you want more? Yeah, you want the more judges in an accelerated process.
Yes.
And you'd like to see access to legal
See due
services,
process, yes.
so people can actually
have due process.
know what the system is. Okay, and Gina, you get the last 40 seconds.
I would go back to the children and stop separating children
Stop
from
that.
their
Just do
families.
that,
That's the number one thing I think that's the most important. It's creating a problem for those children that is going to hold with them for the future, and that's just a travesty. So
Which is terrible. And you kind of wonder why nothing gets, again, I come back to why nothing gets done in Washington. And it happened under President Obama, and it's happened under
do you know
President
how
Trump.
much they get paid per day per child?
Oh,
Those contractors,
okay.
$750.
Okay, so Gina's answer is follow the money. Well, you know, that actually makes sense. Because that normally, when people tell you it's not about the money, it's always about the money. Okay, Manne Favor, thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob Monty, thank you. Gina Calanni, thank you so much.
you.
You seem very reasonable. We'll be back next week on Red, White, and Blue.